당연히 유한다 낭치 모저를 지도자네 다와도 저번 일이야 두그레스 근데 다와 가르스로는 땡중 다와래 아니 저번 가르스로는 처음에 저번에서는 미디셔야 돼.
Whenever I have been given the opportunity to introduce Buddhism, I always make it a point to explain Buddhism in terms of two principles. One is development of a philosophical viewpoint based on the understanding of or appreciation of interdependent nature of reality. And then the second principle is the principle of non-violence, which is the actual action of a Buddhist practitioner, and deriving from that view of interdependent nature of reality.
저번 처음에 봤을 때 아들이야, 아니, 러블 챤 판다. 계속 판다 못하나? 내가 마치 있어야지.
So the meaning of non-harming or non-violent behavior or action or conduct is that if possible, one should help others, and if not, at least one should refrain from harming others. That is the essence of the principle of non-violent action.
세상에다 수저대 가는 남주다 최근 하는 말 샤베이는 잠도도 semji 세대야 돼. semji 세대야 되기 샹라 판다야. 샹도 쿠르티네 샹라 판다야 지요래. 잠주 아니 시간다 잠도다 자체부사리 내다 잠주 예배 젠데기 지금 밑에부터 가르치려나 랜드기 미주공 나는 고요래. 다들 샹 참이죠. 내가 미죠.
So from a technical sort of to explain these principles in the technical Buddhist language, then you can appreciate that in terms of what in Buddhism is called as taking refuge in the three jewels, Triratna, and what is known as the generation of the altruistic mind or enhancement of one's good heart. As it is very evident that the idea of or the practice of generation of the mind entails committing oneself in an activities that are aimed primarily at helping others, and whereas the practice of taking refuge in the three jewels lays the foundation for the individual practitioner to sort of live a way of life within an ethically disciplined lifestyle, which avoids engaging in actions that are harmful to others, thus by living according to the laws of karma or laws of causality.
So the Hindu semji nyamne yabujonlia gamdru nyamne mena semji nyamne yamare.
So therefore, unless the individual practitioner has a good foundational experience or practice of taking refuge in the three jewels, it is not possible to have a high level of realization of bodhicitta or generation of the altruistic mind.
Today in this ane ta jamdro seade ane nangba yin de meng samdi jamdro che.
Therefore, from the Buddhist point of view, the demarcation or the line that distinguishes between a practicing Buddhist and a practicing Buddhist and someone who is not a Buddhist is made on the basis of whether or not the individual has taken refuge in the three jewels.
Jamdro seade yinjimi mijik zane jing ta jamdro domba lami saru jing jamdro shubi sini yinjimi di shu penjene ni jin naba chagi baso tinde 계속 그렇게 말해. 그 수sem 나로리야. 부ද්ධ ධර්ම සංඝ 엉원에 전에 겹지레샤 삼바직 생고 나로리야. 그 제시고 준 것도나 너무 차버래. 야sem 나로 근데 나sem 정도는 나와라 비두야.
So when we talk about taking refuge in the three jewels, we should not have the notion that it involves a ceremony where you take the refuge from a master or something like that, and simply by participating in such a ceremony, you become a Buddhist. That's not the point. The point is, if even without a master, if you, as a result of your own reflection, become fully convinced in the validity of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha as the true ultimate object of refuge, and then entrust your spiritual well-being in these objects of refuge. And that's the point when you become a Buddhist. You have taken refuge in the three jewels. Whereas if, even though you might have participated in a ceremony, but if there is any doubt in your apprehensions, in your mind about the validity of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha as being ultimate objects of refuge, that very suspicion or doubt sort of rules you out from being a practicing Buddhist. Therefore, for a practicing Buddhist, it is important to understand who these objects of refuge are, or what these objects of refuge are, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha.
Buddha said, "Mijik chidaba chikanglia, but Shakyamuni Buddha, the Jalia Kutam, any Javaze, any Yangalan, that the Kansa Chik Chanlia, quite memory, Buddha's lived to talk away your money, that she.
So when we speak about Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and when we speak particularly about Buddha, we should not confine our understanding of the term Buddha only to the historical person who came to India, who taught a certain spiritual way of life and so on. Rather, our understanding of the concept of Buddhahood should be based on levels of consciousness or levels of spiritual realization. So it is a spiritual sort of state of being that has to be understood. So therefore, we can, in Buddhist scriptures, we can speak about past Buddhas, Buddhas of the past, Buddhas of the present, and Buddhas of the future. So the question now is to try to develop an understanding. How does a Buddha come into being? How does a fully enlightened being come into being?
The Buddha says, "Young the Mayon, see the Messiah, Chokunjo, Tanda, Tori, Chokunjo says, Yana, Kindukunjo Yungiari, Kindukunjo says, Yana, the Panjamunju of Panyaji Yunguyana, Panjal Henki Sabins of Panyaji Yunguri, Diomayina, and a Dajamba Yunguri, Sangya Yunguri." So there is one in the Zane, that's our Chokunjo Toya, Chokunjo is the condition, that is shaped.
So when we think about Buddhahood, certainly we will be reflecting upon the question of whether it is possible for an individual to attain such a state or not, or to become a fully enlightened being, to become a Buddha. So here we find that the key really lies in understanding the nature of Dharma. Because if Dharma exists, then certainly Sangha will exist. Sangha members who will have engaged in the path of the Dharma and have realized and actualized Dharma. And if the Sangha members exist, Sangha with the realization of Dharma exist, who have reached stages of levels of spiritual states where they have overcome at least gross levels of negativities and afflictive emotions. If that is possible, then we can envision the possibility of attaining total freedom from these negativities and afflictive emotional states. And that state is the Buddha. So we find here that the key really lies in understanding the nature of Dharma. So when we talk about the Dharma jewel, then here, of course, we are talking about the two dimensions or the two aspects of the Dharma. One is the path that leads to cessation, and one is the cessation itself, cessation of suffering and afflictive emotions. So when we are talking about Dharma here, I think one has to be able to make a distinction between the usage of Dharma as a kind of a generic term which covers also the scriptural Dharma as well. And this is the generic term is the sublime dharma, which refers to the Buddha's teaching as well. Whereas when sort of the Buddha's teaching and the realizations that are based on the practice of this scriptural dharma. But whereas when we are talking about dharma within the context of the three jewels, we are talking about the dharma jewel here. Here, dharma should be understood in terms of cessation, true cessation, or the paths that lead to that cessation. Because it is only on the basis of understanding the true cessation and the path leading to that cessation, then we can have some concept of arhatship or state of liberation.
Today in this time, has the tending doing tending do not only any su tending the Jung Tong de Che Tong Su Che Tong de Sangi Decision Tong.
Therefore, in one of the sutras, the sutra known as the Pratitha Sutra, Buddha stated that whoever perceives the interdependent nature of reality, the dependent origination, the principle of dependent origination, sees the Dharma. And whoever sees the Dharma sees the Buddha, or the Tathagata.
The Su Tension Devon Tong Te Sundiag, Tension Devon Talaya, any that the shape, the shape, the shape, the Shivakalia, Pajita, Zo and the Umed Luruki, now Luruya said that Sheve, Tawa Dishashin Shuna has a quadeshiale.
So when we try to understand. So when we try to understand this statement of the Buddha, the scripture, whereby he states that whoever perceives the interdependent nature of reality perceives the Dharma, and whoever perceives the Dharma perceives the Buddha. If we were to approach this scripture from the perspective of the Nagarjuna's teachings of Madhyamaka school, then one could say that we can arrive at perhaps the most comprehensive understanding of the sort of implications of that statement. So when it comes to talking about the philosophical viewpoints of Nagarjuna, even if people were to criticize me that I'm perhaps biased towards it, I would certainly accept that criticism.
Today, this is the tension of Joan Sidalia. The petit Sadigi, the tempest, Sumupan said Joan. That tension of Joans. That the tension of Joan Sidagi, Niala, Tum Kwa the Kareslamna. Good again, the Dane, good again, some the Dane Joan. That you intend to.
So when we try to understand this fundamental Buddhist philosophical principle of pratitha samuppada, dependent origination, the understanding of this principle that is common to all Buddhist schools is in terms of causal dependence. Pratit means to depend on, and samupada refers to origination. And the understanding that is common to all the Buddhist schools of thought is to look at this principle in terms of the causal dependence, to appreciate and to understand that all things and events come into being only as a result of interaction of causes and various causes and conditions.
That digi implication karas labaina kasol buge ji duishin chebe chedi tamjalo jumebal chuma maris any chebabe loyo mondo sana tone cheba maris do the gen zamda dene any jumare exactly sheyore.
The significance of making this statement that all conditioned things come into being purely as a result of causes and conditions is to deny two possibilities. One is the possibility that they can come into being from nowhere with no causes and conditions, causelessly. So that is one possibility that is being negated. And the second possibility that is being negated is that perhaps these things can come into being as a result of a transcendent sort of designer or a creator.
다들 ten중 tanda nipa chikdi sukjengi chechibi na ane choji che choji chajen shita chikda ane suk maba chimba inani chik shebata wadani chimba inani geshin ngaji ane chadu che deni dinde chene dodun ane chakada kanyi na ya ane chadu che baris dinde induzane
However, there is another dimension to this, to the understanding of this principle. That is to say, to understand principle of dependent origination in terms of parts and whole, the concept of parts and whole, how all physical objects, material objects, can be understood in terms of how parts compose a whole, and how the very idea of, very concept of wholeness depends upon the existence of parts. So there is that dependence in the physical world. And similarly, in the case of non-physical entities like consciousness, then you can look at these entities in terms of their temporal sequences, how unity, the very idea of unity and wholeness is dependent upon successive sequences that compose a continuum or a wholeness. So when you look at the reality or universe in these terms, then not only can you understand all conditioned things as dependently originated, but also the entire phenomena could be understood in terms of this principle of dependent origination.
다전에 숨바식리야 아니 척하다 카이네 다도잖아 낭점 테마스 다도잖아 니야야 말이스 아니야 매버스로나 매버 말이스 오나 가르스람나 아니 척배 기가서다 유진 땐지 척배 관계 아니 주대시리 유진 땐지 다 척발 때네 아니 딱 섬지리 사지 셰비야
And then there is a further dimension to the meaning of this principle of dependent origination, which is to say that all things and events, in fact everything, comes into being purely as a result of mere aggregation of the many factors. And whereas when you analyze there is an understanding that it is simply in dependence upon others that they came into being, that they lack any independent or intrinsic identity or intrinsic existence. There is no autonomous existence or identity to anything. And the identity and existence that we perceive of things are in some sense contingent, which comes into being as a result of an interaction between our perception and the existence of the reality itself. However, this is not to say that things do not exist, but they do exist. But what is the case is that they do not exist with independent autonomous realities.
That tension said near Kojic, sorry, according to this chain. That tether tension return, Tona, Churtumbury said, Church conditions was Luna. That Church Mangu Shaman or something, Mangu Juman or something. 규진 삼라 때네 봐. 규진 삼라 때네 중에 땡중 통나. 아니 디두기 다가다 디두기 패널 요등이 아니 패널 요등이 뒤에 규진 때네 연구에 대해 시행이 아니 동네 다가다 디두기 디두 용약이 다 탑시 지어야 돼야 디두 동네만 용약다 대화 용약이 탑시 지어야 돼 아니 규진을 때는 로고야기 딘데기 다 레줌데기 최초도 와 레줌데기 최디 될 때는 통토야지도 와.
So, corresponding to these three different sort of dimensions or three different levels of meaning of the principle of dependent origination, one can also read three different meanings into this concept of dharma, because referring back to the statement again, to say that seeing dependent origination leads to the seeing of the dharma. So here, if we were to relate to the first level of meaning of dependent origination, which is in terms of causal dependence, by developing a deep understanding of interdependent nature of reality in terms of causal dependence, then one will be able to appreciate the workings of the karma, the karmic law, how experiences of pain and suffering comes into being as a result of negative actions and negative thoughts and behavior. Similarly, how sort of desirable experiences such as happiness and joy come into being as a result of causes and conditions that corresponds to that, such as positive actions and positive emotions and thoughts. So, by understanding the principle of dependent origination in causal terms, one will be able to develop a deep understanding of the law of karma.
다가는 신기 다 유진 잠을 때네 중에 땡중기 내루 직 통일도 전에 왔다 가서 우리 신앙 뭐부 다시 지다는 뭐부 탐자로 안다 유진 잠기 교월 때네 아니 교월 나서 요게 돼 봐. 다디 지 causality 쉐이로 왔다 law of causality 다지 이네 가서 우리 규된 제비 땡지기 남샤 데이터네 제다 민주베 동네들아 대베디기디 다 균제기 팀 대원이란 거든지 세브차.
So once you develop a deep understanding of the principle of dependent origination in terms of causal dependence, what it does is it gives you a fundamental insight into the nature of reality, that everything that we perceive and that we experience come into being as a result of interaction, aggregation of causes and conditions. And you develop a fundamental perspective towards your own inner experiences and also towards the world at large, to see everything in terms of this causal principle. And once you have developed that kind of philosophical outlook, then you will be also able to locate or situate your understanding of karma within that principle, because the operation of the karmic sort of laws or karma is in some sense an instance of this overall general causal principle.
다지네 때는 딱왜 땡중 다 차셔를 때는 딱와 가다다 미국왕 딱왜 다 땡중 고아 딜레윤도 아니 땡중 고아 디ቷ네 짜요나 담바나야 담바 모주베 나네 미투부티디 인 셰임도.
Similarly, when you have developed a deeper understanding of the two other levels of understanding of dependent origination, these are understanding in terms of sort of dependence on parts and whole, and also dependence of the sort of interdependence between perception and existence, then one will be able to develop a deeper philosophical sort of perspective on the world, which is to appreciate that there is a disparity between the way things appear to you and the way things really exist. That what appears to you as some kind of intrinsic, autonomous, objective reality out there does not really fit the actual nature of reality.
Emotion any any emotion zindan any nane tumbalian zin. Dindeg Toneta, Gian Chang Chigi, Takadachi, Numo Nang, Numo Chao Chao, in Shineji, Chinchlo, Loy, Shipiachi, Yonsari.
So once we are able to develop this perspective, this understanding that there is a disparity, a fundamental gap or a disparity between the way things appear to us and the way things really exist, once you appreciate that gap between appearance and reality, then you will gain a sort of a certain insight into the workings of your own emotion and your reactive sort of emotion towards events and objects. You will gain an insight that underlying our strong emotional responses or reactions to situations or events, we see that there is an assumption of some kind of independently existing kind of abiding object, some kind of objective reality out there.
So the day to any loy kasurge lochiraba gashegi any pigeta shenyu medeba shenyu medeba shetuya jikche chajine ada tene takwa imbe kwa di tane any ngoni ji tube tone any tungnilia ji ngebaru ji daos nyeyo yina dini gi sungdi gi tane ba sujogi ta loi namjang any kasoda loi namjang ta damende na lo ne ino ji kada chinchulo ga da lo shenyu sa shenyu so re chinchulo lo to de ni shenyu medenge dindegi loi ji ge denge ji shetu ya jikche.
So once you are able to develop this understanding and appreciation of this fundamental sort of disparity between appearance and reality, and then, as I mentioned before, you will be able to understand that underlying many of our strong emotions, emotional responses towards events and situations, there is an assumption of some kind of existence of an independently existing reality out there. And this will give you an insight into sort of various functions of the mind and the different types of conscious sort of levels of consciousness that exist within you, and also to understand that certain types of sort of cognitive events or mental states or emotional states, although they may seem so real and the objects appear to them so vivid, but in reality they are mere illusions. And
so any church in tene takwa yimba di khoe tene takwa yimba junze de chedi rangxing ji dong ya khuwa chi le yong ya ji yundu dongban yi sia de jumzen ye deng dongban yimba de jumzen ye deng.
So you to carry on with the translation of an earlier statement. So if you are able to develop this understanding that within your own mental states and emotional states, there are certain states which may seem very real and which may seem to be relating to objects which seem so real and vivid to you, but in reality these are states of illusions, that what the objects that they relate to do not really exist. So through that way we will be able to gain an insight into what in technical Buddhist language is called the origin of suffering. These afflictive emotional experiences or emotional states that lead to confusion misapprehension, and then which afflicts the mind. And when this is combined with the understanding of this interdependent nature of reality at the most subtlest level, then we will also gain insight into what in technical Buddhist language is called the empty nature of reality, the emptiness of all things and events, how each and every object and events lack an intrinsic or independent reality, that they come into being only purely as a result of aggregation of many factors, that they do not possess existence or identity that is independent or autonomous. So once you gain insight into that emptiness, then of course you will be also able to understand that any apprehensions that conceive reality in the contrary way, that things exist intrinsically, that things exist independently, then you will know that these apprehensions are misapprehensions. These are misconceptions pertaining to the nature of reality. And then you will also realize that they have no valid grounding either in reality nor in your own valid experiences. Whereas the empty nature of reality has a valid grounding both in reason and also in your own experience. Through that way, you will be able to understand, appreciate the possibility of arriving at a state of knowledge where you can conceive the possibility of eliminating that misapprehension completely, and that is the state of cessation. So the point is that by developing a deep, profound understanding of the principle of dependent origination, you can understand both the truth about the origin of suffering and also subtle suffering, subtle origins of the suffering, and also the truth of cessation. So this is the meaning of the statement that by understanding or by seeing dependent origination, you see the Dharma.
So
through this way, you can see the truth of the cessation and the path that leads to that cessation. So once through this understanding, so once you understand the truth about the path and also the cessation that the paths lead to, then of course then you will be able to conceive the possibility of Sangha members who would have realized and actualized these states, and also Buddhas who would have perfected in these states and these experiences. So this is to sum up, this is the meaning of the Buddha's statement, that by understanding the principles of dependent origination in causal terms, in terms of causal dependence, you understand the law of the karma, the causal principles that operates fundamentally in reality. And also by complementing that understanding of causal principle with understanding of dependent origination at a much subtler level, then you understand the nature of Dharma, in terms of cessation and the paths that lead to the cessation. And once you have gained understanding of cessation and the path, then you also gain an understanding of what Tathagata means or what the Buddha means.
So today in this ane denshi namsha shebala denyi namsha chamu shebala denyi namsha sheba she.
So therefore I feel that in order to develop a profound understanding or comprehensive understanding of the Four Noble Truths, I think it is necessary to have understanding of the two truths.
다가tak에 식세당 로리야 아니 동바타나 땡중태그레스 땡중타나 주대 겐기 디두 주대 겐을 때네 디두 용야디 태그레스 디타나 동네다바 타버레스 군주다바 타버레스 아니 도군여나 다더기 드셔디리 공바장니 아니 군주다바지 여나 아니 디사야지 그래서 디사야다 연구를 solve 다 간다지 도금기 남샤 데이터네 아니 고람디에 아니 태그레스 고람 타나 긴두구조 태그레스 긴두구조 타나 아니 사제구조 태그레스 어떤 고람 타나 최구조 태그레스 최구조 타나 긴두구조 태그레스 긴두구조 타나 사제구조 태그레스 디 자셔고 대반도 측세나로 뜻송도
Therefore, Chandrakirti says in his Prashnapada clear words, he states that if one can appreciate the principle of emptiness, the doctrine of emptiness, if one can posit emptiness, then one can posit the interdependent world, the world of interdependent origination. If one can posit that, then one can posit the causality, the causal relationship between suffering and its origin. And once one can accept the causal relationship between the suffering and its origin, then one can also conceive and accept the possibility of its cessation. If one can do that, then one can also accept the possibility of individuals, Sangam members who have realized and actualized these states. If one can do that, then of course one can also conceive Buddhas who have perfected these states of cessation.
자상가 나와 땡중기 때문에 구조된것이 아니 때는 좀니 준세도 쳐야지 아니 러시 동거셔야 돼 전달돼 봐체 담반이 뜻이 나가서 싶으셔 대단해 아니 담바시 남샤체 담바시 남샤가 더네 아니 가서 촉숨 군조숨도 So
this is how one can appreciate the Buddhist, fundamental Buddhist doctrines of the true truths. It is from the understanding of our phenomenal world of experience and everyday world of lived world of experience that one can appreciate what is known as the world of Samvriti Satya, the world of conventional reality, where causal principle operates. Once you can accept that, then you can also accept the fundamental underlying reality, the empty nature of that world, which according to Buddhism is the ultimate truth, the Paramartha Satya. And here we can see a kind of a relationship between the two aspects of reality, because the world of appearance is used not so much as a contrast or an oppositional world to the world of ultimate truth, but rather it is used as the very evidence or the very basis, grounds on which the ultimate nature of reality is accepted. Once you can understand the relationship and the nature of these two truths, the world of conventional reality and the ultimate truth, then one is in a good position to fully understand the meaning of the Four Noble Truths taught in the scriptures. Once you can understand the Four Noble Truths, then you have laid a profound foundation to develop a good understanding of what is meant by taking refuge in the Three Jewels. So when I speak about two truths, you must keep in mind that I'm speaking from the perspectives of the Madhyamaka school, the middle way school of Buddhism. Of course, the very term two truths is used. It's not something that is confined to this school alone. You can find the concept of two truths in other Buddhist schools of thought, such as Vaibhashika, Swatrantika, and Chittamatra as well. And also we can find this concept of truths in non-Buddhist philosophical schools as well.
다 댐바시드 그래서나 댐바시스 자디 댐바시 영야의 가래서나 나란조 동네 민들보다 대원 되버지 로현길이 예버체 로현길이 예버디 중전에 버체 동네에서 해야지 민들베리 동네에서 해야 매번 쏘고요 쏘야가 도다요 대화서 해야 누구요 뒤주야 도다요 저자가 중전된배 다 대배 대화다 민들베 동네에서 해야지 니 예버 인도산에
Now the question is, why Four Noble Truths? Why do they exist? And why did the Buddha teach the Four Noble Truths? And now here we must relate that to our own experience as an individual human being. It is a fact, it's a natural fact of existence that we all as individuals possess this innate desire to seek happiness and to seek to overcome suffering, and that is a fact of our natural sort of existence, and this is something that is very instinctual and innate, and it does not need any validation or justifications for its existence. Just as it is a natural sort of instinctual kind of desire, so do each of us have the right to fulfill that aspiration. Of course, suffering is that something everybody wishes to avoid, and we also have the right to try to overcome that suffering. Happiness is something that we all aspire to achieve, and of course we have a right to fulfill that aspiration to attain happiness.
대양 민들베 동네 당 대베 대원이자로 되기 쉬운 지체네 그 유진삼을 때네 영어 인도산에 민들베 동네 뒤에 그주 주신 대왕의 용기에 인도산에 아니 군의 용문초하고 굉장히 동네다마다 군주대 마소.
So if this sort of aspiring to achieve happiness and wishing to overcome suffering is our natural state of being, that is our natural kind of quest, then the question arises, how do we go about fulfilling that valid natural aspiration? So here we find in the teachings of the Four Noble Truths an understanding of two sets of cause and results, cause and effects. On the one hand, you have suffering, which is what we all try to avoid. And suffering comes into being from nowhere, but as a result of causes its own causes and conditions. And similarly, you have happiness on the other side. And cessation can be seen as the highest form of happiness. Now here, when we talk about happiness, we should not confine our understanding purely only to the level of feeling states. Certainly, cessation is not a state of feeling, but one could say that the cessation is the highest culmination or highest form of happiness, because it is a true state of freedom from suffering. So, and that true freedom from suffering or happiness, true happiness, again does not come into being from nowhere or without any cause. Of course here, from the Buddha's understanding, cessation, because it is not in conditioned existence, cannot be said that it was produced by something. But of course, actualization or attainment of that cessation depends on the path. It depends on an individual's effort. It does not come. You cannot attain cessation without making an effort. So one could say that the path that leads to the cessation is the cause that leads to the cessation. So within the teachings on the Four Noble Truths, what we find are two sets of cause and effects, which are all aimed at enabling the individual to fulfill this fundamental aspiration to be happy and to overcome suffering.
나 담바시 구름디 아니 균제 중릉기 구름디 매버체 이 냠랭기 아니 냠노께당기 난갈 때는 구름디 송인체 동네 군중 고과 람스 담바시부터.
And then the question could be asked, if of course if that's the reason why Four Noble Truths are taught, then one could ask about why there is this specific sequence why the Four Noble Truths are taught in a particular order, why suffering first and its origin afterwards. So here we should understand that these order has nothing to do with where things come into being in reality, but rather it has more to do with how an individual can go about in practicing the Buddhist path and attaining realizations based on that practice, and that has to do with the order of the Four Noble Truths.
장방공부 안다 유라면 나로리야 내니 시자 내지균이 방자라 대내 도서 맨에 담바 자와 따르스 아니 동의주도 된거보다 디신람 아니 시자 방자 리고셔시 잡어셔시 담바셔시 송니 다 빼나 아주 내기 나게 동의를 뺏고네 아니 도마 내 너기여부터 그냥 시고 그래서 내 너기여부터 시베이나 다 신의 내들 민주별로 게임이잖아요 아니 내디 죽하는 데는 중도와 뒤줄이야 제 전도인 거예요.
Maitreya states in his Uttara Tantra, a Sublime Continuum, which is a text, he states that he states that one must recognize that one is suffering. So the illness has to be first recognized, and then the causes of illness to be avoided, and the state of sort of cure must be sought, and then the medicine that would lead to that cure is something that one must take or adopt. Similarly, suffering is something that one must recognize, and the origin of the suffering is something that one must abandon. And the cessation of suffering and its origin is something that one must aspire to actualize. And then the paths that would lead to to that cessation must be realized. So what this points to is that here the analogy that is used to explain the way in which realizations based on the Four Noble Truths could be attained, the analogy used here is the example of a sick person. In order for that sick person to get well, the first step is that the sick person must know that he or she is sick, or he or she is ill. But without that, the desire to become well or cured from that sickness would not arise. And once you have that recognition, awareness that you are sick, then of course you will try to find out what led to it, what were the conditions that led to it, and what makes you even more sick. Once you have recognized that, then you will also gain sort of an understanding whether it could be cured or not, and then you will have sort of a wish to be free from that illness. Once you have that wish, then you will apply all the medical...
내가 자나 삼아지 내 나라 그 눈이 여보지 위십시오. 다이네 내가 두 못천 여배 그도 어디 다 두고 삼는 거.
It's not just a mere wish, but also once you have recognized what are the conditions that led to your illness, you will also have a stronger desire to be free from that, because in a sense, you will also have a conviction that you can overcome that illness. Once you have that sort of conviction, then you will also apply all the medications and get treatment and so on. Similarly, unless you know that you are suffering, your desire to be free from suffering would not arise in the first place. So the first step for a practicing Buddhist is to recognize your state of being as a dukkha, as in the nature of suffering. Once you have attained that recognition, then you will, of course, look into the causes and conditions that give rise to that state of suffering.
다전에 자든데 인도 동네에 타르에 다 땐도 대화지 되게 가서라 다 땐도 대화 대당 대두지 다 터블럼지 예바 있는 사네 아니 수족이 민두비 동네 삼야디 다 중생자 말이에요.
It's very important to understand sort of the context of the Buddhist emphasis on developing this profound recognition of being in the state of suffering or dukkha. Otherwise, there is a danger of misunderstanding the Buddhist spiritual kind of approach, outlook, and thinking that Buddhism demands a lot of morbid thinking, being sort of pessimistic and thinking only about suffering. The reason why Buddha emphasized so much on developing a profound insight into the nature of suffering is because there is an alternative, there is a way out, there is a possibility of a freedom from that suffering. That's why the recognition or realization of the nature of suffering becomes very important, because the stronger or more deep your insight into the state of suffering is, the stronger the force of your aspiration to gain freedom from that would become. So it is important to understand that this emphasis on the nature of suffering and the Buddhist spiritual path is within the context of a wider sort of perspective, where there is an appreciation that there is a way out, that there is a possibility of a freedom from that suffering. Otherwise, if there is no possibility of a freedom from suffering, if there is no concept of a liberation from suffering, then it is totally pointless to spend so much time reflecting on suffering. It would be just useless.
다 군의 유무하고 군대다 남자하고 군대 이부터 다 군중다 아니 람댕기 딘 대부 연단한테만 컨디션 만드셔 14로 전에 아니 야라중이디 도매 머리고 되는 두지는 남신에는 민수 가사리 계제자고 저하신 도스마다 아니 야라중이 중도 야라중이 룩중도 타네 아니 가서 그게 코 죽도체 코 룽중도 하네 머리번에 맞아 것이부터 마송야다 야나 야 다갈래 양고 룽중도 니송니 것이 된지 아니 계획 된지 중 계획 된지 아니 시베 된지 중 도시야 전 그라 룽중도 니샤 룽중도 니团的 마샤니 가다 군인 유무초 코 죽수치.
So one could say that these two sets of cause and effects that I was talking about earlier refers to the process of an unenlightened existence on the one hand, which relates to the causal nexus between suffering and its origin, and then a process of an enlightened existence which pertains to the causal nexus of a path and the true cessation. Now, when the Buddha elaborates the understanding of these two processes, then he taught what is called the teaching, the doctrine of the 12 links of dependent origination. These being the 12 members of the link being ignorance leading to volition, and then that leading to consciousness and so on. So that is, in some sense, an elaboration on the teachings of the Four Noble Truths. When the causal process of an unenlightened existence that is sort of within the framework of suffering and its origin is elaborated, then you have the sequential order of the 12 links of dependent origination, how an individual sentient being, as a result of certain causes and conditions, enters into this process of samsaric existence or unenlightened existence. Whereas that very individual, as a result of certain practices, can engage in a reversal process of that order, which pertains to the processes that leads to enlightenment. And here, then the 12 cycles, instead of rotating in a sort of a sequential way, their sequences are reversed, and that leads to the true cessation. For example, like if you seize the continuum of ignorance, then of course the continuum of the volitional actions will be seized. If that is seized, then the consciousness that serves as the kind of duje. And
수남이 빌려서 올라가.
Marin.
좀
So that ceases. When the consciousness ceases, the name and form ceases. So you can see that the teachings on the 12 links of dependent origination are in some sense elaboration of the two sets of causes and conditions.
야, 다시는 저것이